related to financial fraud is back underway. Peter Ducey has more outside the Virginia federal court.
The judge did scold the Mueller team for the use of the word oligarch. He said it has a pejorative meaning and they should stop it. All the arguments about allegations of falsified tax returns and bank fraud predate Paul Manafort's time with the Trump campaign, and the president's name has not been mentioned yet. So far this morning, the two witnesses have been a political consultant who did work with Paul Manafort in the Ukraine, and also the seizing agent who was present when the FBI showed up at Paul Manafort's house. He says that they did knock on the door and they used a key to enter the Manafort residence for a raid when nobody answered, but this FBI agent will not say where the FBI got the key.
Was the Me Too movement a cultural touchpoint that led to lasting change or just a flash in the pan? Steve Jordahl reports we could soon find out, as one of its accused says he might run again.
This was Al Franken after he was accused, but before he was drummed out of the Senate on the heels of several credible allegations of sexual misconduct.
To all of you, I just want to again say I am sorry. I know there are no magic words that I can say to regain your trust.
He's hoping maybe Vote For Me will work. Franken told a local Minnesota station he has not ruled out another political run. President Jan Markell of Olive Tree Ministries says for a liberal like Franken, Minnesota voters might just set aside their Me Too rage.
My hunch is these people will put politics ahead of their other movement that we're talking about here. Leftist politics in Minnesota are extremely important.
And she says it wouldn't be the first time he's asked the public to look the other way. There was controversy around his first election to the Senate as well.
He won by, I believe, a few hundred votes, which we think were clearly stolen. I mean, perhaps literally stolen. I think corruption surrounds the Democrat Party here in the state of Minnesota, and it's actually getting worse by the day.
In his interview with a local station, Franken says he misses his old job. Markell says not to rule him out.
I know he wants to get back into the public eye because that's where he's been his entire life, and I think he is longing for that to come back. So I would say he possibly could win.
I'm Steve Jordahl.
Private survey finds that U.S. businesses added a healthy 219,000 jobs in July. Payroll processor ADP says hiring was led by healthcare providers, hotels and restaurants, and manufacturers. July's figure was up from 181,000 in June. American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com, on Facebook and Twitter, and download the One News Now mobile app. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Abraham Hamilton III.
God put us in this world at this time to be salt and light. We don't fold because of the darkness that we're facing. This is not the first time in the world's history that it's gotten dark. God has called you and I to be his ambassadors, even in this dark moment.
Tune in to the Hamilton Quarter, weekdays at 5 p.m. Central on Urban Family Talk. Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
Most immigrants come to the United States looking for a better life, but not through crime. But the 7 Mexicans you see here, those mugshots, they snuck over the border in Texas about 2 weeks ago to rob a jewelry store in McAllen. Now, initially, customers thought they heard gunshots when the gang broke display cases to steal watches and diamond rings. Well, that prompted a 911 call of an active shooter, so police rolled out the SWAT team. But take a look at the surveillance video from inside the store. You'll see a security guard top left, a family on the right, stunned as these 7 masked thieves rush in. One holding a gun orders the security guard to lay down. Now, moments later, a local police officer working mall security will storm in, gun drawn, and he gets unexpected backup from the guy in the red shirt. Police say that is an armed citizen with a concealed carry permit. Together, they secure the scene until police arrive. Now, the 7 are between 23 and 43 years old. All were previously apprehended for entering the U.S. illegally, some in Texas, one in Arizona, one has a prior robbery conviction in California. Charged with aggravated robbery, bond set at $200,000 each. All 7 want U.S. taxpayers to pay their lawyer because they claim to be broke. The local news reports say the men paid $4,500 to get smuggled over the border. This is a felony. They could be deported before or after their sentencing.
Welcome to the show, everybody. Stacey Washington, host of Stacey on the Right here on Urban Family Talk and American Family Radio. Thank you for being with us today. Share the show. Share us online. Like, subscribe, to paraphrase the often repeated mantra of online social media hosts. Thank you for being here. And we are so happy to be even closer, just one day closer, to the launch of the Stacey on the Right show on American Family Radio live, the first hour of the show. So glad to be able to speak to that audience as well, in addition to our Urban Family Home audience and all of the audiences that join into the show via live streaming, the TuneIn app, the American Family Radio app, and the Urban Family Talk app, YouTube, Periscope, and of course, Facebook. Thanks for being with us today. We have a jam-packed show. We're going to discuss today who's really dividing America along the lines of race. A few prominent individuals have stepped forward and are outlining the work they're doing in the Black community to try to combat a lot of the issues that are facing certain segments of the Black populace of Americans today. And I greatly respect individuals who use their wealth and power and influence to help the needy, the disadvantaged, those among us who really need an advocate. I'm going to give credit where credit is due, but we're also going to have some truth telling and some, let's get real here. We're going to have to get more than a little real. We're going to have to get a little blunt about the truth about who's really dividing America along racial lines. And so we're going to talk about that. And then we have in hour two, Sal Nuzzo of the James Madison Institute. He comes on to discuss criminal justice reform with us. And what's interesting about him being scheduled today as a guest is that while he's discussing criminal justice reform with us, we have breaking news. There's an exclusive over at one of the websites that I go to often. I believe it's the Free Beacon, where we're seeing that the Department of Justice is actually blasting the First Step Act. Now, the First Step Act was rolled out a few weeks ago by the Trump administration, and there was some fanfare involved. And a lot of people who were interested in criminal justice reform, which, according to me, to define it, criminal justice reform is where individuals who have not violently offended are given the opportunity to be rehabilitated instead of simply incarcerated, because our jails here in America are criminal training grounds. People who go in for drug abuse offenses who aren't actually criminals, they're people with an addiction problem. They go in and they're basically trained on how to be a criminal. They come out, now they're felons, and they are well-trained criminals. We don't want that. We want to see people who are nonviolent offenders rehabilitated. And so a lot goes into that, and it's a very difficult discussion to have because some people don't know how to talk about the topic at hand. They always have to shift over to their default mode, and that's a part of the problem. But the solution is to relentlessly attack and approach the issue at hand and leave all of the side discussions as side discussions, because there is work that America can do, our government specifically, that can separate those two groups of people off. Violent offenders, they need the book thrown at them. They will violently reoffend. People lose their lives when we are giving hand smacks to violent criminals. But people who are not violent criminals don't deserve they don't deserve any smacks at all. It should be rehabilitation. And that's an opportunity to keep more people out of prison and keep more families together and to keep communities from degrading further and further into having larger elements of the population that are felons and convicted of a crime and unable to find work, et cetera, et cetera. It's a downward slope, a vicious cycle. So coming into the show just now, you heard some audio about this gang of thieves, a group of individuals, most of who have been deported before, did a smash and grab at a jewelry store at a mall in Texas. And it was so loud and frightening sounding that they ended up having a bunch of patrons and elsewhere in the mall were under the impression that it was an active shooter. So the police are called, 911. You've got SWAT coming in. Turns out it's just a simple robbery. A police officer who was there in concert with the security guard and a concealed carry certified individual who was armed and ready to spring into action were able to nab the suspects and prevent any of them from escaping. Now, of course, as you heard in the audio, those individuals feel that they are entitled to a defense at our expense. They're in the country illegally, mind you. again, we need to change some laws. We are being abused mightily by individuals who, I have a story right here. In fact, let's get to that right now. We'll also be listening to some audio from an ICE official who literally had to take a Democrat to task verbally for her ignorance on what breaking the law actually constitutes. So first, let's work our way through all of these. ICE has actually come out with a story, and this is over at cnsnews.com, where they're talking about Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. They're saying, look, this was Tuesday. When parents come here with their kids and they're coming here illegally and they've paid a drug mule $4,000, $8,000, $9,000 to get them and their child here, and they've been raped repeatedly on the way, they don't want to take their kids home. There are already other family members of theirs who are illegal immigrants already in America. So all they have to do is get that child to one of the relatives, which our government facilitates. We actually separate the parents from the children. The children are detained in a separate area where they are processed and then moved into the interior of the country, because we ask the parents, do you have a relative in the United States who can act as a foster care parent to this child while your case is adjudicated? Once they're told that they can't have asylum, the parents, and that they need to be deported and that they will be deported and that they have a deportation order, they're asked, would you like to have your child reunited with you to be deported back to your home country? A huge number of these people say no, because the point to them coming here was that they knew it's a 50-50 chance I might get deported. In fact, there's a greater than 50% chance I'm going to be deported back out of here. But my child, I can leave here because I have the option of saying, no, I don't want to take my child. Why are we doing that? Why are we telling parents, if you bring your child here and we process your asylum claim, if you go, you don't have to take your kid? How is that even a policy? And how are the Democrats defending that when they're the ones who say that family reunification is the number one issue here? They don't care anything about parents in inner cities and parents in rural areas who are separated from their kids. But yet we're supposed to get really super excited about the separation of people at the border from their kids who brought them here to intentionally separate themselves. I mean, let that sink into you for a second. They're bringing the children here intentionally. They want to leave them in America because they know the kids are going to get citizenship. And then once the kid gets citizenship, they get to bring family members in via chain migration. And that parent may have to wait a few years in Guatemala or someplace else. But at some point, they're going to be citizens too. All they have to do is get a kid in here. That is unconscionable. So the ICE official, and here's the quote, the reason most of these individuals have come here in the first place is to get their children into the United States. Many of these individuals have spent $5,000 or $10,000, their life savings, to have these children come into the United States. They've paid smugglers, they've paid transnational criminal organizations, they've subjected themselves and their children to a high level of risk on the journey north. Once they've gotten the child here, many times to another parent that is in the country illegally or another relative that is here illegally, a lot of times they would not want to take that child back with them and risk having to make the journey again. They've succeeded by getting their child here. Now, ICE official Al Bent said it is easier for some parents to leave their kids here and then try to return to the U.S. later on alone without the kid. According to DHS, of the 2,551 children separated from their parents at the border under the Trump administration's zero-tolerance policy, 1,820 of them were reunited with their parents or released to another sponsor in the United States by the court-ordered deadline. But 711 children remained in HHS custody as of July 26th. And of those children, 120 had parents who waived their right to reunification. And another 400 plus kids had parents who had already been deported. This is the same people who support this stuff are the ones who tell us that we need to have Medicare for all and big government policies in charge of every area of our lives. Our government can't even get this right. And yes, I'm talking about the government that is currently headed up by Donald Trump. Inherited problem for sure, but why are they not sitting down and revamping all of these rules and ramming it through Congress the same way the Democrats rammed through Obamacare? Put a bill up that they've already voted for, replace all of the language with immigration language, and ram it through. That is what they did to us on Obamacare. Now, am I advocating for law breaking? No, apparently that was within the bounds of the law for Congress. And that's what they did. The time for playing nice and doing patty cake with the Democrats on immigration is over. We require, as the American people, safety and security within our borders to the degree that it is reasonable and able to be attained by the Department of Homeland Security, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, the United States military, any agency that works on taxpayer dollars that is funded by us should be required to adhere to laws that prioritize the lives of American citizens. Point, end of discussion. That is what should be going on. Regardless of the political factions at play in this country, regardless of the Chamber of Commerce and entrenched Republicans who want to see cheap labor flooding the market and depressing wages for Americans, regardless of Democrats who honestly, they don't know what they want. They just want someone to come in with jackboots on and control every area of their lives because they realize they're incompetent and unable to take care of themselves without government intervention. And then there's the rest of us. We just want the government to shrink down and leave us alone. What I'm looking for, because we're heading into the midterms and everybody's like the Chicken Little, sky is falling, everything's horrible, nothing is okay. What do we do? Everyone is freaking out. Really? Are you telling me that all of a sudden, that silent majority of people that narrowly hoisted President Trump into the Oval Office is all of a sudden looking around at the news and saying, now we really don't like him anymore? Are you telling me that the same people who were unmotivated about Hillary Clinton and stayed home are now suddenly motivated by the Democrats who are saying they want to roll back the sham of tax reform? They want to take your money that you're now in your paycheck that you're now used to getting since February or March. They want to take that money back and increase your taxes. The same people who think it's okay that Kate Stanley was gunned down by a 6-time deportee in San Francisco, a sanctuary city, that ICE agents and ICE employees, we're talking about secretaries and janitors and people who just work at ICE, they were holed up in their facility under siege by Antifa protesters and Occupy ICE protesters. The same people who are advocating for that behavior, the same people who brought you Maxine Waters, who said, when you see these people in public, they can't be in public spaces, confront them, treat them badly, kick them out of restaurants, chase them down the street like they did to Pam Bondi down in Florida. These same people who brought you that kind of crazed, whacked out language, that they're the ones who are going to be taking control of Congress in the fall so they can impeach a president who's brought us GDP at 4.1%? No, absolutely not. Prayer warriors need to be right there on the battlefield, which is prayer, raining down and assailing the gates of heaven for, obviously, that we would keep the Congress, but that a sense of normalcy and wisdom would permeate this country so people could finally wake up and smell what the Democrats are cooking. I can't elucidate what it is here on, good Christian radio, but I think you get the point. All right. When we get back, we're going to have Sal Nuzzo, who's the Vice President of Public Policy at the James Madison Institute, and we're going to be talking about criminal justice and prison reform. You stay right there.
Hi, I'm Will Addison.
And I'm Miki Addison of Aaron the Addisons on Urban Family Talk. Family is so important to everything. I mean, think about it. Right after God created Adam, he made family by creating Eve as his wife.
We'd like to invite you to the Marriage, Family, and Life Conference this summer. We'll have a full slate of experts to help encourage and equip the body of Christ to fight for the restoration of the family.
Our speakers include Ryan Baumberger of the Radiance Foundation, Dr. Clarence Schuler of Building Lasting Relationships, Abraham Hamilton III, Pastor Bert Harper and his wife Jan, and more.
We'll even be there.
The Marriage, Family, and Life Conference will be Friday and Saturday, August 17th and 18th at Hope Church in Tupelo, Mississippi. Come help us fight back against the enemy's direct attack on marriage and family. That's the Marriage, Family, and Life Conference put on by Urban Family Communications, a division of the American Family Association. You can learn more and register at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a Legacy Moment. The longer I walk with Christ, the more I'm aware of the devastation of pride. God hates pride. It destroys everything, including the proud person. I think one of the saddest stories in the entire Bible is the story of King Uzziah, found in 2 Chronicles chapter 26. Uzziah had been mightily used of God to usher in reform and revival. Almost everything he did, God blessed. But as is the case far too often, he couldn't handle the prominence given to him by God. 2 Chronicles chapter 26, verse 16. But when he became strong, his heart was so proud that he acted corruptly. God gave him a platform, but he had not cultivated a heart of humility. He became proud and arrogant, and then he trespassed his calling by going in the temple and trying to act as a priest. God basically said to him, Uzziah, I didn't call you to be a priest. I called you to be a king. So we read in 2 Chronicles chapter 26, verse 21, King Uzziah was a leper to the day of his death, and he lived in a separate house, being a leper, for he was cut off from the house of the Lord. Here are 5 characteristics of pride. Number 1, pride is always characterized by self-promotion. Secondly, pride is characterized by disregard for boundaries. Thirdly, pride is driven by competition and comparison. Number 4, pride typically is critical of others. And then number 5, pride is always demonstrated by a person who is unteachable. Here's what I want you to remember and do today. Identify areas of pride in your life and confess them to the Lord. As an act of your will, continue to surrender all you are to the Lordship of Christ.
Legacy Moment is a production of Moody Radio.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the show. StacyOnTheRight.com, AFR.net, and you can also go to Urban Family Talk, where you can register for the conference. The time is getting short if you want to be with us for that. Now, right now, it's my pleasure to welcome Sal Nuzzo, Vice President of Public Policy for the James Madison Institute, for this important discussion about criminal justice reform, which I'm excited about. I'm super pumped about learning more about it, and also getting this information out to you, the listeners and viewers, about exactly what works and what doesn't work. Sal, thank you so much for joining the show today.
Absolutely a pleasure to be with you, Stacy.
I can't wait to talk to you, because this is the subject that I've written some op-eds about, and I've kind of listened to other people discuss it, and I kind of see it as like there's 2 camps of people, and there may be more, but in my estimation, there are 2 camps of people. There's the people who are kind of like, okay, criminals are just treated too harshly in this country, and we incarcerate too many people. And so therefore, we need to not incarcerate people on drug offenses. We need to not incarcerate people on their first violent offense. We need to give people an opportunity to, be rehabilitated. And so it's kind of the soft smack on the wrist, which enables violent offenders to go out and basically kill more people. And then you have the others who are really in a much more nuanced approach, who are saying, look, some people need the book thrown at them, but other people who haven't violently offended are definitely candidates for rehabilitation. What could that look like here in this country? I tend to be more of the latter than the former. Talk to me about this.
Yeah, absolutely. And JMI has worked on this topic for a number of years, both in the juvenile and in the adult arenas. And what we have come to find out is you're fairly accurate in that you've got folks who predominantly come from a center-left philosophy who say, look, we are over-incarcerating. There are disparate impacts. The social costs of incarceration are enormous, and we need to do something differently. And they preach about criminal justice reform from a social justice angle. On the center-right, you have a growing cohort of largely fiscal conservatives who approach the policy from the standpoint of, we can do better with the tax dollars that government is using, and we can steward those dollars better by looking at kind of micro-targeting reform efforts. And the other part of it is that there is a public safety aspect to this, that if we are treating non-violent, mostly drug offenses in the same way that we're treating very violent offenses, and we're incarcerating folks together in those capacities, we're creating a system that perpetuates itself and that grows. And so on the center right, you have this fiscal conservative kind of public safety angle. The interesting thing is the policy goals, the policy reform ideas are largely the same regardless of how you're going about kind of packaging, selling the ideas.
So let's talk about some of the ideas, because I thought it was pretty interesting that we have had you scheduled for a little bit, but just out today is this letter to President Trump from the Department of Justice blasting the First Step Act, which is interesting because I thought the First Step Act was widely supported, but now you have an entire arm of the government, very important arm at that, the Department of Justice, saying they don't like this.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Groups like the James Madison Institute, Right on Crime, conservative coalitions of folks from around the country have really been encouraging the U.S. Congress to take up this idea of prison reform. It's been going on for the better part of the last 2 decades, and it really has started to gain some momentum, and the First Step Act was a part of that. It's unfortunate. Quite honestly and quite candidly, the Attorney General and the Department of Justice have been a bit reluctant to embrace any of the concepts that have been coming out of the conservative groups over the last 2 years. But what we can say is that they have shown to be successful. States like Texas, Oklahoma, Georgia, very conservative states have shown that you can radically reform your criminal justice systems, you can save money, you can improve public safety, and some of the concepts behind those things are behind those reforms are things that, you know, would make sense to conservative members of the voting public. And so there are things like sentencing reform and restoring discretion on the part of judges to be able to do the thing that we entrust them, judge, and discern whether or not a person is a habitual drug offender in need of aggressive treatment or is a person that really is a violent person who needs to be locked away. There are things like pre-arrest diversion programs where we can reach in before a person becomes consistently in the criminal justice system and get to them with treatment so that they're not tapped with a felony conviction and kind of perpetuating the cycle of crime and poverty. And there's a number of reforms on the juvenile side, especially here in Florida. We've done some great things over the last 4 years with our outgoing Secretary of Juvenile Justice. And these are all done in conservative states. So it's absolutely something where we hope the states are showing how we can be a model for the federal government.
Okay, so you covered a lot of ground there, and Sal, I agree with a ton of that. I really feel like there's more opportunity for us. And I don't discount people who have already been incarcerated but deserve an opportunity to come out and make a life again. I do not believe that a felony conviction is the end of a person's life. People can be rehabilitated, serve their time, and come out and be contributing members of society. And we have to believe in forgiveness and redemption because, this is Christian radio, and I'm a believer. I don't just talk on Christian radio. I believe in it, that God forgives, He redeems, He heals, and we can go forward and do amazing things with our lives. But I see the bulk of the effort that we have to undertake in this country as being a two-pronged effort. Really, we have to catch people before they've been arrested. We have to catch, or if they've been arrested, but they're not being prosecuted for a felony, that's when we catch them and try to divert, educate, retrain, instill a sense of respect for being law-abiding, because that's before they've had the chance to be incarcerated and trained on how to really be an excellent criminal.
Absolutely. And one of the programs that we've been piloting and expanding here in Florida is this idea of pre-arrest diversion. And so in Florida, it's called a civil citation program. And so the way that the program works is that for very, very low-level offenses, the law enforcement officer has the discretion, instead of writing a notice to appear or bringing someone in on a petty misdemeanor or even in a felony in some cases, to write a citation that then diverts that individual into either a social services center or a counseling program. They still have requirements. They still have a fine to pay. They still have community service to undertake. But instead of giving them either a felony conviction or starting them down the road toward one, we're getting to them at the beginning and at the outset. And so what we found is that in Tallahassee, where I'm at, which started the program, the reoffending rates or the recidivism rates for individuals that have gone through that were a third of what they were for similar crimes where the individual was not given the citation. So it's proving itself to be valuable. The other part of it is it doesn't cost taxpayers a dime. It's run by the social services safety net in kind of the nonprofit community. It diverts away from the courts, so it involves, you're not undertaking court costs. Individuals are not having to undertake getting an attorney, taking them to court, doing arraignments, and all of this stuff. And the program itself is beginning to show a lot of fruit, and it's something that we hope other states are going to begin to look at.
So what is the mechanism by which states that are looking to take part in this type of activity can kind of join in the bandwagon that you're leading down there in Florida?
Sure. There's an organization called the American Legislative Exchange Conference. It's called ALEC. And they provide what's called model legislation for any state to consider going down the path, not just in criminal justice policy, but in a host of other policy areas. We brought the Florida legislation to ALEC, and they adopted it as model policy. And so any state that's interested in this can log on to the ALEC website. It's alec.org. They can search on pre-arrest diversion and find it's kind of the boilerplate template for what legislation might look like, and then they can tailor it to whatever their particular state looks like. I would also encourage folks to, follow organizations like JMI on social media. We're constantly tweeting and posting about different policy efforts that we have. We have folks that look to us from around the country, and really we have taken on criminal justice reform as a 21st century, conservative cause. And this is really where I think we're going to gain ground in winning hearts and minds in policy reform for generations to come.
Fantastic, because I am aware of ALEC, and they get a bad rap, but the fact is they do the heavy lifting for states so that you don't have to try to figure out how to do the thing that you're doing. You don't have to kind of waste your time with recreating the wheel. So what other states besides Florida have kind of gone through that process with ALEC and, joined you in reforming criminal justice in their states?
Well, really, the state that launched the entire movement was the state of Texas. And that happened around 12 years ago through an organization called Right on Crime. Right on Crime was started by an ultra-conservative Texas legislator who decided he had had enough of the state spending billions of dollars on new prisons and not getting anything in the way of benefit in terms of reducing crime rates. And so his name was Jerry Madden. He started this effort, and he began it as a legislator and began to research it and began reforming the Texas system. And over the course of that time, I want to say they've closed 8 or 10 prisons. They've lowered their crime rate to historic lows, and they've saved upwards of $10 billion to taxpayers. Since then, you've had states like Oklahoma, Georgia, Louisiana just did an incredibly robust package just this past year. And you even have some liberal, more left-leaning states like Connecticut, Maine, and some others that have undertaken similar policy reforms. Regardless of how they go about it or the philosophies that they're using to get the right policy in place, and you're absolutely right, ALEC does get a bad rap. ALEC is a collection of legislators who come together to say, what are we doing that's working and what are we doing that we change, and how do we make it easier for folks who are in legislatures around the country to be able to make good policy. And so those are the kinds of things that we're about. And again, thank you so much for allowing us to have a platform to market this.
So I hope to speak to you about this again in more detail and to kind of continue to outline this, every day it's a different group of listeners. We have our regulars, but then we have people who tune in and they may have missed this conversation. I encourage people to go to StacyOnTheRight.com or urbanfamilytalk.com/Stacy and listen to the podcast, or share this with friends who this is a primary concern for many, many people in America, where they have they want to see something good happening with people who are incarcerated or may have been arrested. They want to reduce recidivism. And you've just described how this has been implemented successfully in a number of states. And so they can then bring this to a legislator that they may have a contact with, have some rapport with, and start the ball rolling for this type of activity in their own state. So I want to close the interview out with some of the, you shared money saved and things like that. But if you were just to nutshell it for someone who isn't maybe as policy aware or has never heard of ALEC or anything like that, they just know they wish there were fewer people incarcerated and that crime could continue to be decreased, what would you say is the chief benefit of doing this type of criminal justice reform work that JMI is spearheading and ALEC is kind of doing the legwork on? What is it that people get out of this as constituents, taxpayers, people who live in the community, et cetera?
I would say ultimately we are saving lives, and I don't mean that as hyperbole. We are getting people out of a cycle of crime and poverty by reaching into where they are, by meeting them at their place of the most need. And the policies that we create at the state level are going to, person by person, create a better society, and they're going to create a more kind of a society that it's not always about saving tax dollars, but as we're saving tax dollars, they can then be directed and diverted into programs that are going to truly benefit us as a society here in Florida and in other states that are pursuing them.
Oh, I'm loving the sound of it. And when you talk about saving lives, it becomes more real to us when we hear some of the stories about people who've applied for clemency and been granted from President Trump, and we hope for more of that. One of the stories that I think has really been roiling in the background for me and a group of people that I've been communicating with is the story of a young man. He was on active duty, and after he left the service, he was in the Air Force, I believe. He was at a nightclub, a fight broke out, he retrieved his weapon, shot, and it was a stand your ground type of thing because he was punched first. And he was incarcerated for 25 years. The stand your ground defense did not work for him. And I hope to see clemency for that individual. And I hope to see more people who don't even have to make it that far that aren't incarcerated because we can do more to keep them out of prison. Sal Nuzzo, Vice President of Public Policy for the James Madison Institute, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Anytime.
All right. We'll talk to you again soon. We will be back with more. We're going to talk more about ICE arresting 127,000 criminal aliens in 2017. And we'll take your calls. Be right back.
One of the first steps to becoming a Christian is recognizing our sinful nature. What makes this so difficult is that we have selective vision when it comes to our own issues. It's easy for me to see your faults, but when it comes to seeing my own, then my eyesight automatically gets bad. One surefire way to measure new birth in Christ is by opened eyes and a clear vision. Sometimes we can pass between having sight and having no sight because we have fallen asleep to the needs around us, or our perspective on those things that are eternal is distorted. Whatever the case, there is nothing more dangerous than having blurred vision and still thinking that it's clear. Don't measure your vision by your own standards. It will be warped and distorted every time, but rather measure it by God's standards. God desires that our eyesight remains clear. So how is your eyesight today? With a heart for the urban family, I'm today's urban woman, Tony Johnson. Connect with us at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Hi, this is Steve Tiber with 8 Days of Hope. Hurricane Harvey was the second worst disaster ever seen on American soil. 8 Days of Hope responded to that need in Houston, Texas, back in March, where 4,700 volunteers came from all over the world in all 50 states to love and serve people in need. When we left, we realized that there was still much more to do. So many people still were hurting, hundreds of thousands of families looking for somebody, anybody to help them. Here's your chance. 8 Days of Hope 16 will be back in Southeast Houston October 13th through October 20th. It's free. We provide the food and lodging. We're looking for skilled professionals, people who are semi-skilled, and people with no skills or less skilled and want to give back. For more information, you go to our website, 8daysofhope.com. We're expecting about 2,500 volunteers from all over America to go back to Houston to love and serve those in need. Hope to see you in Houston. 8daysofhope.com for more information. 8daysofhope.com.
I'm Chad Pergram with the Speaker's Lobby. Fights over a government shutdown rarely have anything to do with confirming a justice on the Supreme Court, but that may not be the case this year. Government funding expires October 1st. That coincides with the start of the Supreme Court's new term on the fabled first Monday in October. Senate Majority Whip John Cornyn characterized October 1st as a target to confirm President Trump's pick for the High Court, Brett Kavanaugh, but Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell isn't as firm. Now President Trump is saying he might push for a government shutdown if Congress doesn't fund his wall. Here are two scenarios. Imagine the Senate confirming Kavanaugh in late September, and then a shutdown hits on October 1st. That dashes Republican momentum just before the midterms, snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. The story would shift immediately, and the GOP receives zero credit for muscling through Kavanaugh. Now consider if the Senate hasn't confirmed Kavanaugh by October 1st and there is a government shutdown. In that case, the GOP stumbles all over its own narrative about the importance of confirming Kavanaugh. With the Speaker's Lobby, Chad Pergram, Fox News.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right.
I know how powerful the youth voice are, and I think now is the time where we're going to start hearing more and more voices from the youth, because they understand how powerful they are now, and they can move and shake. They can make things happen to youth. I think a lot of people are tired of hearing, the adults talk. Yeah. But when you hear the kids speak, when you hear the youth speak, it's a little bit more touching, and people feel obligated to get something done.
When you were growing up, did you see gun violence, that kind of stuff? Was your neighborhood that tough, or was that something that has gotten worse if you watched Baltimore?
Yeah, I mean, I don't like to talk about, but it's easy. But my neighborhood was called the Pharmacy for a reason, right? Like it was the Pharmacy. They made a TV show about my neighborhood, The Wire. So a lot of those things was for TV, but there was a lot of things in there that was real. I mean,
that much dope dealing.
Yeah, it was just the drugs, the prostitution, the fighting, the killing, the police brutality, and the school system and the prison system. Like I've been a part of all of that growing up, so I know what that feeling is like, and you almost become immune to that when you was growing up. But now that I'm able to step back and see exactly what I was going through dealing with, like I feel like I have to do something to help that.
Welcome back to the program. Stacy Washington, host of Stacy on the Right. I'm also the co-chair for the National Advisory Council Project 21 of National Center for Public Policy. Nationalcenter.org is where you can find out more about us and what we do over there. And you can also read the blueprint. You can follow the links over to that and see what we're proposing as policy suggestions and legislative actions for the Trump administration and those on Capitol Hill, and how to improve the lives of Black Americans through limited government and targeted intervention. So we're back today, back from the break. Fantastic interview with Sal Nuzzo. Honored to have him on the program. I have a little bit of breaking news for you. So first of all, I know we were promoting having Janet Pirro of Fox News on the program, and she had a scheduling conflict, and so she will be with us on Monday. And then tomorrow we are going to be so excited to speak with Eric Trump. He's coming on to talk about the president and some of the travel that's on the schedule, and so it'll be our first time speaking to a member of the Trump family, and we're really excited about that opportunity. So right now, you were just listening to Carmelo Anthony talking about gun violence. And so I'm kind of in the middle here, because on the one hand, I just want to rip him for saying that gun violence is up since Trayvon Martin, like that's a benchmark. Kids have been getting gunned down in inner cities for decades. Trayvon Martin is not the benchmark. Trayvon Martin was actually in the process of beating up Zimmerman when he was shot. This is not a test case for us on police brutality or the incorrectness of certain laws on stand your ground or misapplication of those laws. You have to use a case that is actually the facts line up with what you're trying to assert. Trayvon Martin's case doesn't meet that bar. Carmelo Anthony is someone that he grew up in inner city Baltimore. He had this terrible, neighborhood situation. And now as an adult, he's done some things that I totally disagree with. He sent 4,500 adults and children to the March for Our Lives. I feel like that was a waste of his time and money. But then on the other hand, he's done some other amazing things, school supplies and things for teachers in disadvantaged areas. He does work in South Africa because he did some kind of safari. And while he was there, he met a lot of people in the country of South Africa and felt like there was something there. He also works with the poverty-stricken people in Puerto Rico because he has some heritage from that part of the world. So he's definitely out there moving and shaking and making some things happen. But in my opinion, he really detracts from that work when he tries to take up these tropes of the left and bring them to the fore and kind of push those instead of focusing. Really, it takes a lot of money and a lot of effort. I applaud the efforts that he's already taken, but what else can he do with all of that money and all of that influence to make sure that kids know that their best ticket out of where they are, it's actually not the NBA like Carmelo Anthony has done. That's less than 1% of the country that gets to take advantage of being a professional sports person. The best ticket out of poverty and neighborhoods like the ones that he grew up in is an education and a clean record, not being arrested, not being involved in criminal activity, et cetera, et cetera. When do we hear that from him? Now, admit it, this is a lengthy interview he did on ESPN. He's talking about the gun violence. He's invoking Trayvon Martin. And then he goes forward with a little bit more information, which I honestly, I found it fascinating to listen to because he clearly has a heart for trying to improve these situations. But as a conservative, I can't agree with him making the Trayvon Martin case the benchmark for everything that he's doing or for him pinning his feelings on that particular incident. So he starts to talk a little bit more about his work in the inner cities. And I thought it was really instructive, especially after listening to what legislation and criminal justice reform from the government side can look like, from agencies like JMI, James Madison Institute, can look like. Here's what it looks like when someone who has millions of dollars and a national platform through their work in, sports can do. And so it's just a little bit of what he's been doing. It's number 5.
Well, I want to walk through some of the stuff that you're doing just to give people a sense, because I think a lot of people, they're watching the news, they feel completely helpless. Talk about this tools for teachers. Why are you trying to give teachers better tools and technology? Like, why are teachers in your heart?
I mean, let's just face it, is the teachers get treated like, we all know what the teachers get treated like. The education system, the school system turns their back on the teachers. When you go around and actually talk to these teachers and then listen to their stories about their relationship with the kids, as far as, having to give kids, utensils and book bags and books and food, at the end of the day, they become, kind of one of their parents or their chaperone, somebody that they have to look after more so than just a teacher to a kid. So when you hear those stories, you want to give back. And I mean, that was the easy part, giving pencils and pens and book bags and books and, arts and craft supplies. And, those things go a long way.
So they do. And I think, when he talks about the plight of teachers in inner city schools and what they have to deal with kids not having supplies and, poverty, impoverished communities, and how different it is from what many of us are used to, which is you actually get this school supply list and it's ridiculous. And then you go drop a couple $100s at 3 or 4 different locations trying to get everything on the list, including paper towels and, tissue and wipes to clean down the desks and everything. You almost wonder, what else can I bring to this place? My taxes are high and now I'm bringing in all the cleaning supplies. You drop all of that off. You stack everything up in the teacher's classroom. And then when you arrive, the teacher has the room decked out like it looks like a glorified New York loft. It's got everything you can think of in it. And also their computer, rolling carts and laptop carts and, iPad carts and everything. And if you're coming from an environment like that, or if that's the only public school environment or private school environment that you're exposed to, it can be kind of difficult to really connect up the difficulties that inner city teachers face in just getting enough supplies in the room. Kids who are showing up, they don't even have a backpack. Kids who are showing up to school hungry every day. Kids who show up and they honestly don't have any school supplies and they aren't getting any. And so you have to make sure that every kid has at least, pencils and things that they need to do the minimum amount of work. And that's on top of teaching them and educating them. And look, in suburban schools, kids come into kindergarten, they've had 50,000 words spoken to them by the time they're 5 years old. They have all of their sight words that they can read. A lot of them have even been instructed in comma usage, and they're using adverbs. They know what an adverb is. These kids come in, they can count to 100. Some of them can count to 250. Some of them, most of them, can add and subtract. The reason I know that is because we lived in a suburban district, and when our kids were in public school, one of the first things we did when we were thinking about moving into the community is we took a trip to the park in the area. And we would go there. Like the more we drilled down and kind of narrowed it down to this neighborhood that we wanted to move into and buy a place in, we would visit that park once a week. And we were gauging, are these people friendly? What are they like? What are these people going to be like if we're neighbors with these people? While you're there at the park and the kids are playing, you can talk to the other parents. So, how I noticed you have, is she 3? Is she 4? Is she 5? How are you getting her ready for kindergarten? And parents are very open about it if you ask. Oh, we're doing these flashcards, we're doing those she's doing, this preschool program, et cetera, et cetera. And that's how I familiarize myself with the expectations in the district. I also called the school district and I spoke to the secretary at the elementary school that was in our target area. And I asked her, how can my child be ready for kindergarten, the standard at this elementary school, not what it says for the state of Missouri? Because I'd already reviewed that and we were already there. She said, most people are worried about sight words and all of that. But she said, in my opinion, and I've been a school secretary for 30 years, the most important things your child has to be able to do is sit still for 40 minutes at a time. So be able to sit still and listen and engage in an activity for 45 minutes at a time. Your child should be able to follow a multi-part instruction. And your child should be able to feed themselves and go to the bathroom. And I was like, what? She said, you'd be surprised how many people, they do everything for their kids. The kids can't even go to the bathroom on their own. You need to make sure that your child is able to be in this environment. I said, well, my daughter's already in preschool. She said, well, then she's probably got all of that down. And then I asked again about the academic requirements. And she said, kids come in with a range of abilities and the teachers here are prepared to deal with all of that. Now, that's true, but it's kind of not true because none of the 3 children that we put through that elementary school, none of our 3 children were ever in a classroom where anybody came in at kindergarten who couldn't read. And so were they reading like college level? Of course not. They're 5-year-olds, but they could read a hard book, a hardback book. They could also, many of them were doing the Dr. Seuss books. They could read them. So why am I going through all of that? Because in a suburban school district where all the kids come in and they can read and they can add and subtract and recognize all their numbers, the teacher starts off at a different level than in an inner city school where some of the kids come in and they can read, some of them come in, they haven't cracked a book open ever, and most of the kids come in without having been exposed to 50,000 words. And that's not 50,000 different words, it's just 50,000 words. There's a huge difference. It's conversations like that's the kind of thing that has to be exposed to parents. Because in my opinion, when parents are informed that, look, most of the kids are going to be able to do this when they get there, regardless of whether or not they're driving a Lexus, or a Kia, a lot of parents, a huge segment of parents who hear what the standard is are going to work to meet that standard. There'll be parents who won't care, parents whose lives are too chaotic for them to really even pay attention. But until we get to a place where we want to reach out to those parents, every one of them, and let them know, just as a heads up, when your kid gets here, they need to be able to do X. Hey, just as a heads up, the state says your kid should be able to do this at the end of kindergarten, but most of the kids in our school can do this at the beginning of kindergarten. So just so you know, to hit the ground running, you might want to, work with your kid instead of just having the kids stay up until midnight watching TV and playing all summer. maybe want to spend 20 minutes a day reading to them, definitely want to expose them to some flashcards with numbers on them, teach them the concept of addition and subtraction through normal everyday activities, and kind of start preparing them for the school day, and that means getting that bedtime down well before school starts, getting up in the morning routine well before school starts. There's a lot that goes to it. And so for kids who are impoverished and do not have access to that information, their parents don't have access to that information for whatever reason, they're coming in, they're already behind. Now, that sounds crazy, doesn't it? A kid who's 5 years old showing up to school on the first day as a kindergarten is already behind. But that is the truth in so many situations. And a kid who is behind in kindergarten and doesn't catch up in that first year is much more likely statistically to be behind in fourth grade. And the fourth grade reading statistics, kids who can do reading and math in fourth grade, that is the year that prisons take their first survey on whether or not, or how many, not whether or not, but how many, what percentage of those kids they need to have prison beds ready for by the time those same kids are in the 8th grade. Because kids who can't do reading and math in the 4th grade are much more likely to be significantly behind in the 8th grade, to the point that they're skipping school or dropping out of school. They're involved with criminal elements in their school district or in their neighborhood, and they've been arrested for the first time, and the corporate prison system is already preparing beds for them, bed space for those people, because no school means they're running around during the day getting involved in no good. No good leads to arrests. Arrests lead to incarceration. So when you think of it like that on the continuum, because there's a lot of work that gets done by sororities and other social organizations in the Black community, and they call it the school to prison pipeline. And it's the way it's described, it's like, well, there's these people out there and they already want your kid in jail. No, but they're gonna set aside a bed for your kid if they can't read and do math in 4th grade. It's not that they want your kid there. They're preparing a space because they know your kid's going to be there. Because they figure parents who can't teach their kids how to read and do math in 4th grade, that can't interface with that teacher and make sure they're on grade level in 4th grade, are certainly not going to be around to make sure their kids are in school in middle school. That's where we are right now. So yes, we want criminal justice reform, but we want it back there. That's where we reform it first. We'll be back with Hour 2 right after this.
Talk. American Family Coffee is coffee with a cause. Not only is it a delicious way to start your day, but it can also wake you up to the idea of supporting the American Family Association through a product you'd normally buy anyway. Choose from morning blend, evening blend, and everything in between. Get your American Family Coffee and support the American Family Association at afastore.net.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. 6 people have been killed in the wildfire in Redding, California. Authorities are still searching for 6 people missing.
Tuesday afternoon, police in Redding asked for public help locating people. They said they'd found 14 of 20 persons missing, that 2 of the 6 remaining have homes that are still standing, and 1 person's a possible transient with no known address. Last Thursday, extreme nighttime conditions sent the fire east into the city. 6 people were killed, including 2 firefighters. As of late Tuesday, officials said the fire had destroyed nearly 900 homes and 400 outbuildings and damaged several more.
Meanwhile, chaplains are on hand in California, ministering to people affected by the devastating fires. Bill Bumpus has more.
Chaplaincy teams with California's Southern Baptist Disaster Relief and the Billy Graham Evangelistic Association's Rapid Response have been visiting shelters in Northern California to offer spiritual and emotional counseling to survivors. In addition, Samaritan's Purse is mobilizing volunteers to assist families. The ministry's Tim Haas describes what volunteers will be doing.
In a fire, you're literally looking in the ashes. You're literally scooping up ashes, searching for something for that person or for that family to bring closure. Maybe it's jewelry. Maybe it's a coin collection. Maybe it's a photo album. Who knows? But literally shoveling through the ashes just to bring complete closure to what is a devastating loss.
Haas says prayers are needed for wildfire victims.
We'd love for your listeners to lift up the folks, not just of the Redding fire, but there's 19 other fires in the state of California. There's very serious fires also in Oregon. A lot of forest fires in the upper Northwest. Definitely has our attention.
He says God may be calling some to even consider being part of the response to this disaster. More information at spvolunteer.org. I'm Bill Bumpus.
A Chicago area school board recently made a policy change that could mean they could not enroll their children in school if they disagree with it. Bob Kellogg explains.
5 years ago, School District U46 in Elgin added the terms sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender-related identity or expression to their policy on bullying. Lori Higgins of the Illinois Family Institute says board members have now gone a step further by adding that to the Student Code of Conduct.
What they've done now is transfer that language into the Student Code of Conduct, and parents have to sign and agree to the Student Code of Conduct in order to enroll their children in school.
Higgins doubts that most parents are even aware of the change, but if some did raise an objection, she is uncertain the board would move to prevent their children from enrolling.
I don't even know if they would want to take that on now. There would be a lot of controversy over it if they tried to say, sorry, you can't enroll your child. So I don't know what they're going to actually do, but I can tell you that if 100 people refuse to sign it, they would have to change the policy.
Higgins says the policy states in part that if a student refuses to use the pronoun that a transgender student prefers, they could be guilty of bullying or harassment. I'm Bob Kellogg.
There's warm weather on the West Coast while the East gets wet. Janice Dean has a look at the forecast.
Continued hot and dry weather through the end of the week will keep conditions difficult for firefighters across Northern California and the Northwest. Heavy rain will spread from the southeast up to the East Coast today, bringing the potential for flooding across much of the east through the end of the week. And we could see some strong to severe storms across portions of the Northeast later on this afternoon. Large hail, damaging winds, and isolated tornadoes will be possible. I'm Janice Dean, Fox News.
Everyone on board is alive after an Aeromexico jetliner headed to Mexico City smashed into a field Tuesday. The plane had just taken off in a blustery storm from an airport in Durango State when it went down and skidded to a stop but stayed intact. All 103 people on board were able to evacuate before the plane caught fire and burned. American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com, on Facebook and Twitter, and download the One News Now mobile app. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Please call your senators today. It's time to put an end to the liberals' filibuster. Tell your senators to switch to a majority vote and defund Planned Parenthood now. Call the Capitol Switchboard at 202-224-3121 or go to afaaction.net. Again, call 202-224-3121 and tell your senators to switch to a majority vote and defund Planned Parenthood. Your call will make a difference.
Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
Are athletics important to these kids? You think it's their minds right now?
No, I think both. I think athletics are important, but also their mind. I think both. I think it just plays. It is when you're a part of sports and you're a part of your mind. It just brings so much camaraderie and so much fun. You know, we are in a position right now in America, more importantly, where this race thing is taking over, you know, and because I believe our president is kind of trying to divide us, but I think
kind of,
yeah, he is. Not I don't want to say kind of. He's dividing us, and what I noticed over the last few months, that he's kind of used sport to kind of divide us, and that's something that I can't relate to because I know that sport was the first time I ever was around someone white. you know, and I got an opportunity to see them and learn about them, and they got an opportunity to learn about me, and we became very good friends. And I was like, oh, wow, this is all because of sports. And sports has never been something that divides people. It's always been something that brings someone together.
Welcome back to the program. Stacey Washington, host of Stacey on the Right here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. Well. Who was that? Okay, guys. It was LeBron James. Now, don't get mad. Don't get all huffed up. It's okay. There's a method to the madness. LeBron James was just blasting President Trump. The quote is, he's using sports to divide us. And I thought we should listen to that and a little bit more, not more audio from LeBron James, but to discuss what is actually going on here. And I think we have to again highlight, just like with Carmelo Anthony, who's in the NBA as well, that LeBron James does a lot of work in the inner cities. He does a lot of work with disadvantaged youth, and that's good. But we cannot tolerate this continual misdirection by people who he feels like he has the right to do it and say whatever he wants because he's in the NBA and he's got all those championship rings and et cetera, et cetera. That doesn't give him carte blanche to say things that aren't true. I haven't been 100% in love with the president's tweeting about the anthem protests, but he's not the one who started this. He's not even close to the one that started it. Now, why would it be important for LeBron James to pin this on Donald Trump? Well, we're really close to the midterms, are we not? We're less than 100 days out. And what is the impetus for all the kneeling and everything? Well, police brutality was what Colin Kaepernick said motivated him to start these anthem protests. But a part of me really feels like he wasn't being completely honest about that, because he was going into free agency and he's not satisfied with his contract with the 49ers, and he kind of gained a lot of notoriety out of it. But it backfired. As what should have happened in his mind is people should have been like, oh my goodness, he's so right. The police are so brutal. They're so out of control. We need to totally support him and, lift him up as this total activist, and that would help move his public persona, and that he'd probably get a really great contract out of it. But that was a total bad move on his part. His girlfriend at the time, a DJ on a New York City radio station who happens to be of Islamic extraction, was kind of propelling him into those really what were bad acts. And then the lunacy of him kneeling during the national anthem to protest police brutality while on the job and employed by the NFL. The ridiculousness of him actually putting himself out there on the job. Notice I'm saying on the job, because he could have protested at any time. He could have protested at 6 o'clock every evening. He could have protested at 6 o'clock in the morning every day. He could have done it on any time he wasn't wearing his uniform for the team that was paying him millions of dollars to play football. He chose to take the football arena and the playing of the national anthem to do the kneeling because he knew it would get a lot of cameras on him. And he knew it would get him a lot of interviews outside of his work time. But like anybody who has a job, all of us are subject to, hey, look, you can talk about pretty much anything you want on the radio, but you can't tear down the audience that listens to the target audience of the radio station that you're on. That would be the applicable comparison for me. You can't do things that alienates the audience that is the target of the programming that we're producing. For him, he was alienating the audience for the work that he was contracted to do, which is playing football. This isn't really a statement on whether or not I believe he truly felt that there was police brutality. He probably did and still does. In fact, a lot of the interviews that he's had, he seems to have a real affinity for this idea that, out of the billion interactions a year that police have with people in America, including people of color, that there's somehow a real disparity in how the police treat blacks. I have had all kinds of interactions with the police when it comes to, being pulled over in my vehicle, and they haven't all been the rosiest of interactions, but the bulk of them, over 90% of them, have been completely by the book, and the person has been professional. And so we're talking about a very small handful of those interactions where I would say that wasn't my favorite one. Like I didn't like the way that went, but I'm only getting pulled over for, moving violations, things like that. Nothing criminal, felonious, anything like that. So I feel bad for Colin Kaepernick because he got sold a bill of goods by the girlfriend, and then instead of him separating himself off from that when he saw it was detrimental to his career, he doubled down on it. And in doubling down on it, he kind of emboldened a bunch of other people to do the same thing. And now the NFL is in a position where the employers, the team owners, they employ the actual players. They can't tell their employees what to do. Now, every employee-employer relationship is not the same. People who work in a factory are going to get ordered around by their employer at a much different way than someone who is an NFL superstar. But in the end of the day, those NFL players still have a boss to answer to. They still have someone who's going to decide whether or not to renew their contract, and they still have to produce a product that they are being paid to produce. And so in alienating the fans, they've peeled off a bunch of people who just, quite honestly, can't be bothered with paying those kinds of prices for season tickets or tickets, that you buy at the box office or online. They can't be bothered to pay that kind of money to watch a group of people act up before the game. The next layer, that's what we're looking at this season. When the season starts and they really get into the games and the anthem protests, if they continue, you'll see that secondary layer of people who are diehard fans, but they're not that diehard, and they'll peel off. The ratings have taken a hit. And so the question or the statement that LeBron James makes about he tries to blast Donald Trump and say it's his fault. President Trump has participated in the melee, the fracas online with the tweets and everything about the anthem. And it is a divided conversation. You have everybody who basically says, you're kneeling during the anthem. I don't care what you're kneeling about. It disrespects the flag. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to see it. I'm done with it. And then there's the other people who are admittedly possibly more nuanced. They might say, I understand you're kneeling during the national anthem. You don't care anything about the national anthem. You're just using that as a vehicle to get your message out. I kind of agree with you on police brutality, or I like the team players and I support them, whatever. And those people who are expressing that, they're not really so much in favor of protesting during the national anthem, but they're not willing to leave the sport because of it. And then there's everybody else. Like, I don't watch football. I know my mom's a Redskins fan. My dad's a Cowboys fan. So they have this rivalry where they each have their own shirts for their teams. They go to the games together, dressed up in their garb and stuff. And this is like Sundays. If they're not at an actual game, they will actually just watch on TV and wear their stuff at home. I mean, it's just crazy how much people love football. That being said, they are Democrats and they don't really love the anthem protests. They're not going to come out as strongly as I would against them, but they don't love the protests because they feel like it takes away from the fun of the game. So when LeBron James says it's Donald Trump's fault, is he being honest about that? No. And it's not about his opinion or whether he feels like Donald Trump is dividing the nation on it. The fact is, Colin Kaepernick created the issue. Colin Kaepernick said, here's a side, my side, and everybody else is on the other side. That's where the division came from. And every single player that kneels during the national anthem is a part of widening and deepening and making more permanent that divide. Not Donald Trump. As much as people on one side or the other may dislike the president's tweets, or they may love the tweets because they're like, yeah, sock it to them. I really don't like what they're doing. Whether you like the tweets or don't like them, the tweets are not the reason why people are kneeling. They're not kneeling because of Donald Trump. Now, there may be people who didn't kneel before who now feel like they need to kneel because they don't like what the president tweeted, but he didn't start it. So blaming him for the division is really disingenuous. And really, LeBron James should be better able to articulate what he feels about the issue. But why should he? He could just go on Don Lemon, and Don Lemon can kind of prompt the conversation. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that. and you can get your back slaps from Don Lemon, but the point is not being made. When more than half of the country doesn't support the protest that you're putting on and refuses to listen to the reasoning behind the protest because they don't like the methodology, you're not winning the conversation. For those who want to compare this to the civil rights movement and say, well, back when people were sitting in at lunch counters and they were, doing different things to advance the civil rights movement, they were called names. They were told to stop what they were doing. They were told they were disrupting the society, but they had a base of support within the white community, and they pushed forward because they knew they were in the right. My answer to that is, how dare you compare kneeling on a football field, individuals who the minimum amount of money that those guys are making sitting out there is $440,000. If you ride the bench in the NFL, your minimum, according to the players union, is $440,000. How dare you compare that to men and women who were working as bottle washers and dishwashers and janitors and nurses, and some of them teachers, many of them pastors, putting their actual lives on the line and getting bitten by dogs and hit with water hoses for the right for their kids to have the same textbooks and educational opportunities and to take part in the American dream like everyone else in the society. How dare you compare those two? They don't equate. They're not in the same realm of reality. A bunch of overpaid, game-playing grown men who, honestly, the level of criminality in the NFL is what they should be kneeling about. They should be kneeling before the games and praying about how fewer of them can beat their wives, run dog fighting rings, get involved in shootouts in the inner city, mismanage their money, not invest any of it, and end up broke within 5 years of ending their career with the NFL. They want to kneel about something. They have a whole lot of their own personal problems they should address. And notice LeBron James is talking trash from over on his side from the NBA, but their contract states they're not even allowed to protest during any part of their appearance in their uniform. They actually have a rule in the NBA that every player who is visible to the public has to be standing during the national anthem. So how is he even fixing his mouth to talk? He can't even protest because his employer won't let him. So there's a lot of discussion that we can have. There's a lot, we can, hey, is there police brutality? According to Heather McDonald, no. She uses government statistics to show that there's not a concerted effort, an intentional concerted effort by the police in the United States to brutalize Black Americans. There's no acknowledgement that areas that have a high level of crime are going to have a different policing atmosphere than a suburban neighborhood where the worst thing you ever hear about is somebody going 2 miles over the speed limit, where there's one murder every 20 years. It's going to be a different kind of policing environment. But we can't have that conversation because we're too busy listening to LeBron James, who can't kneel, talk about people who are kneeling and how everything that's going on is Donald Trump's fault, which, in my opinion, is a symptom of Trump derangement syndrome. The man just can't stop talking about Donald Trump. You know what I say about that? When the haters come calling, just say my name and keep it moving. But he's not making any sense. It's not Donald Trump's fault. All right, when we get back, we're going to talk about how the media has their catchphrase with Donald Trump and the fall midterm elections, and some more on illegal immigration. Stay right there.
Meet Dan Steiner, president of Preborn.
Jill came into our center about 8 months ago, and she was in a really difficult spot because her husband her boyfriend was incarcerated. She didn't have a place to live. She's out on the street. She came into our center, and when she saw her baby on the ultrasound, she says, I've got to find a way to do this. She changed from abortion-minded to wanting to choose life for her baby, and that's where we came in, coming beside that ultrasound with baby clothes, with housing for her. Her baby just delivered last Wednesday. It's a little boy. He's beautiful. That's the power of ultrasound.
80% of women choose life when they see their baby on ultrasound. To find out more about how you can help save a baby's life, go to preborn.com. That's preborn.com. Or dial pound 250 and say keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. All gifts are tax deductible. Your love can save a life.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Over the last few months, I've done a number of radio interviews dealing with sexual abuse and sexual harassment. During each program, I try to acknowledge the possibility that sometimes an allegation might be false. This is not to diminish the importance of speaking out, but also acknowledge that sometimes there may be a false report. One prominent example is what happened to Andy Puzner, who was originally put forward as President Trump's nominee for Secretary of Labor. If you do an internet search on his name, you will see numerous stories and YouTube clips of his ex-wife on the Oprah Winfrey Show. They were going through a divorce, and she claimed that he abused her. You will have to do a much more extensive internet search to discover that his ex-wife wanted to take back what she said. In fact, she has published letters all through the 1990s and even as recently as 2016 and 2017 explaining that she lied. In one email, she even explains that he was not abusive and that she was counseled to make those allegations to help with the divorce settlement. But none of that helped. The stories are out there, and he withdrew his nomination last year. Marina Medved talks about the Yiddish story of a wise elder who wanted to teach a woman making false allegations of the power of her words. He told her to cut the top off of a feather pillow and walk about town. After the feathers flew out of the pillow, he asked her to go around town and collect the feathers. She never could get all the feathers back into the pillow. His ex-wife opened her pillow years ago on a national television program. Try as she might, she has never been able to get all the feathers back into the pillow. I've heard that President Trump is considering Andy Puzner for another position in the administration, but there may still be too many feathers around town. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right.
Why do you think these attacks are becoming so much more frequent now?
It's not surprising that Donald Trump is increasing his attacks. The walls are closing in on him.
The walls are Don't just stand there, try and brace it with something.
It feels like the walls are closing in on the White House. It feels as if the walls are closing in here.
I think the walls of justice are closing in on President Trump.
Increasingly desperate, feeling like the walls are closing in.
The president clearly feels all the walls closing in on him in terms of the Russia investigation.
The walls are closing in.
I think at this point, the walls are spinning. It does feel like the walls are closing in, but I think that the administration at this point can start to see the walls closing in.
He feels the walls closing in on him. Everybody he talks to says the walls are closing in.
This is another potential wall closing in.
This president is feeling the walls are closing in.
The walls, meanwhile, are closing in on the president of the United States.
I think he's feeling the Russia investigation. I think he's feeling the walls closing in on him.
I think he knows that the walls are closing in.
The walls may be closing in higher up at the White House.
The president apparently believes that the walls are closing in on him.
The walls are closing in on the president right now.
That Donald Trump feels the walls closing in.
So there was a lot more of that audio, like another minute or so. And these are clips of actual news individuals making the same statement. At one point, Joanne Reed was going to say something else, and then she remembered, oh, no, I'm supposed to say walls are closing in. And she said walls are closing in. She actually policed herself. This is the media just launching into this coordinated attack about walls closing in. So Free Beacon does this mashup, and you can hear little bits of the Star Wars movie where the original one, the first one, where you've got Princess Leia and Luke Skywalker and Chewbacca. They're in the garbage compactor on, I think it's the Death Star, and the garbage compactor has been initiated or initialized, and the walls are coming in, and so they're like, brace it with something. And it's meant to be funny, and I hope you got a laugh out of that, because there are no walls closing in on President Trump. The Manafort trial is underway, and we've heard nothing. We've not heard the president's name mentioned once. The FBI has been on to Paul Manafort for over 10 years looking at his financial dealings. And now they're prosecuting him, and it has nothing to do with, well, it has to do with President Trump, because they're now prosecuting him because he became a part of the Trump orbit, because he was the Trump campaign manager for a very, very short period of time during the campaign. And so they're, utilizing that to put the screws to him. That's it. That's all it is. Yep. So they got to do better. They have to do better than that. So we missed one little bit of audio from first hour where we were talking about illegal immigration. And I have some more stats for you, some more kind of crazy stats for you. I want to first listen to, there's an ICE official and he's testifying before Congress. And as he's testifying, he gets, they start asking him questions. And one of the senators is asking him a question about what's going on and why the people are being treated like criminals. Mind you, illegal aliens is the subject. And she's just perplexed by all of it. And so he has to really lay into her a little bit, and she still didn't get it. It's number 2.
Mr. Albans, would you send your child to FRCs?
Again, I think we're missing the point. These individuals are there because they have broken a law. There has to be a process.
They have broken a law only as deemed so by the president with his...
No, ma'am. They're there for violation of Title 8 of the Immigration of the U.S. and Nationality Act. Okay, they're U.S.C. 1325. That's illegal entry is both a criminal and civil violation. They are in those FRCs pending the outcome of that civil immigration process. They have broken the law.
Well, these are mainly, my understanding is that under zero tolerance, these are no longer civil proceedings, but in fact, were criminal proceedings.
They were criminal proceedings when the Border Patrol prosecuted them, but at the conclusion of that process, once the individual came into ICE custody, they would go through administrative proceedings.
I'm confused.
Okay. The criminal proceeding is an individual being prosecuted for the criminal violation of improper entry.
So she's confused. So who are we listening to? You've got Democratic Senator Mazie Hirono from Hawaii. She's been serving in the Senate since 2013. You would think in those intervening years she would have had the opportunity to learn that entering the country by any other means than a legal port of entry is an act, a civil crime, and it's also a criminal violation, which the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Officer informed her of. She's saying that the only reason they're lawbreakers is because Donald Trump said so. But that's not true. Donald Trump has he has not signed any new legislation on the border. On the subject of the border, he has signed no new laws. Remember, he can't pass any new laws. He can issue executive orders which outline how existing law is to be applied, but he can't pass new legislation. The zero tolerance policy that he implemented was not new law. It was simply a reversion to executing the laws on the books as they are written. This is a hugely important distinction because if this woman who is sitting in the Senate of the United States receiving, what is it now, $178 a year, $178,000 a year plus perks and bennies, and she doesn't understand how our tricameral government works, like that the executive branch doesn't pass law, we got problems. We have huge problems. So you have Matthew Albans. He's explaining to her that the illegal immigrants are in these detention facilities because they broke the law, specifically Title 8 of the U.S. and Nationality Act, which coincidentally was passed, I believe, while Donald Trump was like a baby. And he's 72 years old, right? There's no way he had anything to do with the passage of that law. Now, yes, it's important that we call her out and, refuse to sing her praises for being so embarrassingly ill-informed. But we have a couple of other things that we have to go over as well. Namely, that we've got just hordes of criminal illegal aliens just rushing into this country. It's like an invasion. And when people say that, I had someone say to me in an online messaging group about a month ago, he said, "You're using that Ann Coulter rhetoric, that incendiary rhetoric about illegal immigration. But we have to stand together with our brown brothers and sisters against this tyrannical form of government that President Trump is implementing because it's based on racism." Now, first of all, that's a bunch of nonsensical word blather. That's first of all. And second of all, please don't think you're insulting me if you're comparing me to Ann Coulter, who's a best-selling author and someone who, honestly, her brain is like a finely tuned Patriot missile with a huge sword on top that's been sharpened to within an inch of your life, and it's just zooming around at supersonic speed. That woman's books it's a part of the national treasure. You don't believe me? Read a couple of them. So not insulted. I'm not here for the comparisons, though, because I don't need to be compared to Ann Coulter on immigration. I actually have the feelings and beliefs and information-based position because I've informed myself on it. And I've not only just read some Ann Coulter, but I've read many, many authors on, especially Thomas Sowell is another one who's written some amazing books that touch on illegal immigration and other problems that are endemic to our society. This is an informed opinion that I'm holding, and it's not based on racism. I'm sporting a permanent tan, but even if I wasn't, there's nothing racist about wanting immigrations and customs enforcement to do their job and for our laws on immigration to be followed. It's not xenophobia. It has nothing to do with fear of people who don't come from this country or any of that stuff. It's just not the truth. People who hurl those kinds of insults are simply showing you that they have no coherent answer to your concerns about illegal immigration. The fact that there are probably 30 million illegals here, not 11 million. We know there's more than 11 million. Like, we got to stop using that one. How do we know? Well, if you just use the data on arrests, people who are arrested and incarcerated in this country, you know there are well more than 11 million. So you got a top official at the Department of Homeland Security testifying before the Senate Judiciary Committee on Tuesday, stating that the Enforcement and Removal Operations Division arrested more than 127,000 illegal aliens with criminal convictions or impending criminal charges during the fiscal year of 2017. Again, it's Matthew Albence, Executive Associate Director for ERO, and that's a division of ICE, testifying during an oversight hearing. He said the number represents an increase of almost 11,000 in the number of criminal aliens that were arrested in the year 2016. So that's a significant uptick. Now, what were these people guilty of? Because you're probably thinking, they kept their library books too long. They didn't say hello in the South. You know, it's against the law not to speak in the South. There's a ton of stuff they're doing wrong. They're not washing their dishes every night before bed. They're going to not making their beds up in the morning. No, these are serious offenses. Albence broke down further by the type of crime that illegals were convicted of or had charges pending for: more than 76,000 dangerous drug offenses, 48,000 assaults, 11,000 weapon offenses, more than 5,000 sexual assault offenses. So that's 5,000 Americans who have been sexually assaulted by people who, had they not entered the country illegally, those people wouldn't have been sexually assaulted. More than 2,000 kidnapping offenses. These people believe in snatching folks up and kidnapping them. More than 1,800 homicides. 1,800 Americans who would still be alive, working, paying taxes, going to church, pumping gas, contributing to the economy, spending time with their loved ones. 1,800 of them who are not alive today because we can't seal up our southern border. In fact, in fiscal year 2017 and again in fiscal year 2018, nearly 9 out of every 10 aliens arrested by ERO came to our attention after their arrest for a local, state, or federal criminal violation, and the vast majority of those convicted criminal aliens. Now, as if this isn't bad enough, because you're probably thinking, dang, that's bad news. Thanks for bringing me down on hump day. Sorry, but the truth matters. Imagine what these numbers would be if California, the largest state by population in the United States, wasn't a sanctuary state that refuses to cooperate with immigrations and customs enforcement to bring lawbreakers to justice so that they can be deported. Remember, I think the number is something like over 40% of the population of California is illegals. Yeah, you're like, what? Yeah. So the zero tolerance policy for violations of 8 U.S.C. 13.25, improper entry by alien, in which Customs and Border Protection would refer aliens that arrested for illegally entering the country to U.S. attorneys' offices along the southwest border for criminal prosecution, in accordance with the standard practice employed by federal law enforcement agencies who arrest individuals for committing federal crimes. CBP transferred these adults to the U.S. Marshal Service pending prosecution. But we got a senator from the great state of Hawaii who thinks that the only reason these people are criminals is because Donald Trump said so. Now, if this weren't such a serious subject, I would have asked my producer to give me some laugh track audio so we could all just sit back for a second and grab our little coffee mugs and our water bottles, so we could be hydrating ourselves, and we could just spend a good 5 minutes laughing at how ridiculous that statement is. But this isn't a laughing matter. We can't take time out to be mirthful and enjoy her stupidity, because the stupidity that she's peddling is killing people. The refusal to seal the southern border is killing people. The refusal to erect a wall in the places where a wall is needed, to rehabilitate the sections of wall that are currently like the stuff you see outside of a scrap metal heap, is yielding 2,000 kidnappings, 5,000 sexual assaults, 11,000 weapons offenses, which coincidentally, shouldn't the Democrats be primarily concerned with that alone because they're all for gun control? If you're for gun control, shouldn't you want to control the number of criminals who have access to illegal weapons? Because, you know why they're not, because they're too busy worrying about how many AR-15s I have. They're too busy worrying about how many law-abiding citizens are actually members of the NRA, because it's not about them caring about reducing gun crime. It's because they want an actionable item that they can run on in the midterm and in the general in 2020. With the Democrats, everything is just a voter issue. It's not that they care about the black community. They've moved on. Refugees and illegal aliens are their new core constituency. They've forgotten about union folks, except for trying to get right to work, stopped in Missouri and other states that are considering it. They're not concerned with well-being and getting people a better life. It's about making sure that you vote the way you're supposed to and then shut up. Get back. We don't want to hear anything from you. Which coincidentally, I found it odd that today Barack Obama announced the candidates who are Democrats who he's supporting in their individual races. It's an endorsement list that he put out. And guess who he didn't endorse? Ocasio-Cortez, socialist extraordinaire. So I guess she's a little too radical for him. She's basically just an extension of the things that he peddled while he was in office. And I'm also wondering, as you might be, who's going to be held accountable for the 76,000 drug offenses, 48,000 assaults, 11,000 weapons offenses, 5,000 sexual assaults, 2,000 kidnappings, and 1,800 homicides? What government officials have to be held accountable and put on trial for permitting this to happen in our country? The reason it's allowed to continue is because no one's being held accountable. So I guess these people's lives don't matter. I guess it just isn't important. At least not to them. We'll be back with more Stacey on the Right after these messages. You can call in to 866-963-2037. That's 866-963-2037. We'll be back with more right after this. This is Just a Minute with Stacey Washington. The crisis at our southern border has stymied all reasoning and thoughtful consideration of what is driving the influx of people irresponsibly dragging tiny children thousands of miles to break our border laws. Most of those arriving here illegally are claiming credible fear that they will suffer violence or reprisals in their home country. The problem with that is that just 5% of all claims made are found to meet our standards for asylum. This doesn't matter because those who are caught at the border are released into America, and 95% of them never show for their asylum hearing. The result is a marked increase in people competing for low-wage work, which disenfranchises our low-income citizens and is burdening our welfare system. Central American migrants claiming asylum have surged 800% over numbers recorded in 2012. Violence in Central America has declined by 40%. It's time that we made it clear we are closed to illegal entry into our country. I'm Stacey Washington. Find out more at StaceyOnTheRight.com.
And my father, your great-grandfather, fought in World War II.
Really?
He was a gunner on the big ship out in the Pacific Ocean.
Wow.
Your great-grandmother did her part, too.
Was she on a ship?
Oh, no. She stayed back home. She and a lot of her friends worked really hard in a factory because the men had gone off to war.
Ooh.
And they held scrap metal drives to help in the war effort. The folks back home were heroes, too.
Here at the American Family Association, we consider you the heroes back home. As you fulfill your responsibility of caring for your family day to day, your partnership with us is crucial as we fight the enemies of freedom in America. Thank you for your commitment to the American Family Association.
Grandpa, what's a scrap metal drive?
Let's get some cookies, and I'll tell you all about it.
Donald Trump's America.
The president is standing by one of his top advisors. Just days after marking his one-year anniversary as White House Chief of Staff, John Kelly told the West Wing staff that President Trump has asked him to remain in his post through the 2020 election. Kelly agreed to the request, and if he remains in his post through 2020, he would be among the longest-serving White House chiefs of staff in American history. Tensions between the president and Kelly have eased in recent months. The 68-year-old retired Marine Corps general came into the job with a mandate to impose discipline in the West Wing. 2 days ago, the president tweeted a picture of the two of them smiling side by side with the message, "Congratulations to General John Kelly. Today we celebrate his first full year as White House Chief of Staff." Over the course of the last few months, Kelly's imminent departure had been predicted by numerous media outlets. At the White House, John Decker, Fox News.
This is Stacey on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
You're a big you're a Cowboys fan?
Sure. More of a Texans fan.
More a Texans fan.
Sure.
Jerry Jones basically came in and said he's implementing his own policy and saying about his players standing. And NFL, I guess, put a gag order on him today. When is this going to end? What's the solution to this?
Look, every team is going to have to figure out how to approach this. I will say I think the NFL did itself a lot of harm last year. An awful lot of their fans, folks who go to games and like to cheer on football, found themselves thrust in the middle of politics. And, a couple of years ago, if I were to suggest to you that suddenly we have an issue of athletes refusing to stand for the national anthem, that would have been viewed as absurd. And I think the NFL didn't do itself any favors last year, and that's a shame. People ought to be able to enjoy football without it being turned into a political statement that many understandably see as a slight to our flag and to the many people who stood up and fought to defend our country.
And I'm going to use that audio from Ted Cruz, welcome back to the program, to kind of wrap this thing up. Whether or not you're a big proponent of the American flag or that you see it as a symbol of the unity of this nation, or if you just feel like it's idol worship and you just don't care about it, discounting the feelings of other Americans means you don't really understand how advocacy works and how to get people on board with something that you want to get support on. So the way to get support for a discussion and a national conversation about the interaction between certain communities and the police is not to offend half of the country. And so, I don't see anything changing about this situation. We see the back and forth. It's like a ping pong conversation, which it's been in the news a number of times for the past few months. And I've chosen not to talk about it here because I just feel like it's another source of division for us. And it's not even important because I know as many people out there who love football, there are just even so many more who don't care one way or the other what football players are doing. And the reason I don't care about what they're doing, other than the work that they do in inner cities and the philanthropic type stuff, which I fully support, is because they can't seem to get their own acts together. And so, I'm going to need you to kind of have your stuff together before you lecture me about whether or not I support your cause. That's what I'm going to need. You know what I'm saying? That was one of the things that we really noticed a lot. If you look back at the civil rights movement, when Martin Luther King was doing his work, they chose to put on their Sunday best, not because the people who were doing the marching and the protesting and the sit-ins had tons of wardrobe options to choose from like we do nowadays. They chose to put on their Sunday best because they believed that if they could present themselves in an upright, presentable manner, if they presented themselves as professional Americans, if they cared about their appearance, if they offered themselves up in a decorous manner, that would be a better face for their movement. When those photographs are taken of them walking erectly in their Sunday best over the bridge, when you see these pictures, they still ring true today. Decades after all of it occurred, you still see those pictures and you straighten your own shoulders up a little bit because you understand what they were projecting. It wasn't just that they couldn't take the situation anymore, which they couldn't. It wasn't that they felt like they weren't experiencing the fullness of what the Constitution guaranteed to them, which they weren't. But it was also that they wanted the respect of those who disagreed with them, if for nothing else than they were upright Americans deserving of respect, exercising their rights under the Constitution. Kneeling doesn't give that same kind of impression. So agree, disagree, but when your marketing materials are bad, you can't be surprised when you're not getting the results that you want. And that's just it. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time, whether the president tweets about it or not, whether it becomes an issue that it's just constantly in the news. I feel like touching on it today is plenty, and then unless something amazing happens, yeah, just not that. It's just not that great. Not that great at all. So people were asking about the numbers that I shared on it's from CNS News. So the article, it's called DHS Official, ICE arrested more than 127,000 criminal aliens during fiscal year 2017. I'll put it in the streams, and I believe I tweeted it out. If I didn't tweet it out, I put it on the Facebook page. But in any case, I will put that out there for you guys if you want to have those numbers. It's so disgusting that we have to put up with this. Now, last thing about immigration today, and then we're going to get to this story about Canada Dry being a total sham. Now, why is this important? You guys, I gave up soda almost 3 years ago. I don't drink Sprite or Pepsi or any of that stuff anymore. The only thing I have left that I allow myself to drink that is, technically in the arena of a soda is ginger ale because it's supposed to be good for you. Wait until I tell you what we've just found out. I mean, I'm raging mad. Raging mad. So first, last on immigration, and this is important too. Remember, Mexico has just elected a hardcore leftist socialist who actually seems to be pretty open to interacting with our president, even though he doesn't share any kind of, capitalistic stuff in common with our nation. So this is in Mexico City, and we've got this letter from Mexico's president-elect unveiling an ambitious infrastructure and economic development plan, and he sent the letter to President Trump. And the quote from him, his name is Manuel Lopez Obrador. The most essential purpose of my government will be to ensure that Mexicans do not have to migrate because of poverty or violence. We will try to make immigration, with an E, so outflows, optional and not necessary, wrote the leftist president-elect, promising the greatest effort ever undertaken in Mexico to create jobs and reduce crime. Now, coincidentally, and I've shared this before, I want to make sure you know this, the largest number of Mexicans concentration of Mexicans anywhere in the world outside of Mexico is in the United States. Also Nigerians, also a few other nationalities. Like we're where everybody's trying to get, okay? Now, Central Americans actually outnumber Mexicans in illegal crossings at the U.S. border because a lot of Mexicans have seen the negative conversations around immigration and they're staying put. And they're staying put because things have improved a little bit in Mexico, namely due to us shipping a bunch of our factories down there. Now, the GAO report found that 45,272 Mexicans overstayed their visas in 2015. So you've got the illegal immigration through the crossings over the border, but then you have visa overstays. And remember, visa overstays comprise about 40% of illegal immigration. And that's from all over the world, not just Mexico. The GAO concludes that out of the 45,000 plus Mexicans who overstayed their visas in the year 2015, about 42,000 of those individuals, so basically all of them, are still here. And it's 2018. Let me check. Let me double check. Yeah, 2018. Okay. So they've overstayed their visas by 3 years. We have no effective mechanism by which to extract individuals who are overstaying their visas. So President Trump has responded with his own letter to Mr. Obrador. He sent it in a Spanish translation, and Mexico's Foreign Secretary designate Marcelo Ebrard is going to read it at a press conference in Mexico City later on this week. President Trump said, "We welcome legal immigrants from around the world, but we can't accept illegal immigration. We're ready to take up the theme of economic development as well as security relations as well as Central American migration." Neither letter mentioned Trump's campaign promise to get Mexico to pay for the wall. "We haven't spoken about the issue of the wall," Ebrard said in response to questions from reporters. And experts are questioning whether the new government, due to take office in December, will be able to dedicate the necessary funds to carry out Obrador's development plans. My thing with that is, what other choice do they have? Any other situation in which you had hundreds of thousands of people who were criminals crossing over into another country and killing and raping and kidnapping the people in the country they were going into, it would be considered an act of war. That kind of language, which is just truth-telling, gets liberals so upset they literally, you can see the eyes start to bulge, the face gets red, and they look like they want to choke you. They don't actually choke you, but they look like they want to. That's not cool, bro. That's not cool. It's not about your feelings. It's not about whether or not you love illegal immigrants because you don't want them in your town, but you love them in America. It's about the fact that it's like an invasion. Numbers like the ones I shared, that's not the kind of numbers of people who are here out of love, as George Bush said, or here to make a better life for themselves, or they're here for the economics. Some of these people are here, just like the president said, to rape, assault, kidnap, and kill. At least 127,000 of them are. And that's way too many. Just think about the population of your town and compare it to 127,000. Just imagine 127,000 criminals rolling up into your town. Now, if you live in a huge metro area like Atlanta or something like that, you might think, oh, that's a lot of people, but at least we have a few million here, so it wouldn't be a fair fight. We're talking about hardened criminals. If you live in a small town, that's more than the population of your town by a lot. I can think of a ton of small towns right here in this area could not contain that. We're just letting that happen. All right, y'all. It's time. We got to talk about this Canada Dry. This is a serious problem. It's serious because I had convinced myself, as had many other people, according to this article, that drinking Canada Dry was something that was good for you. Now, if you are unaware, ginger as a root that you buy at the grocery store, you can buy it with the vegetables. You can peel it off, the skin, which is like paper almost, and you can cut it into chunks and boil it and then pour that boiled ginger water into a strainer to keep the chunks and the little strands out, and you can make hot tea with it. And it's really great if you have the flu or if you have a fever or if you have any kind of stomach upset. You can drink that warm or you can refrigerate it and drink it, and it's very helpful. You can sweeten it with honey. You can use sugar, but you can sweeten it with honey, and it's very restorative. And it tastes pretty good. Like it has a kind of almost spicy taste, but not really. It's delicious. Now, it's harder to make it taste like Canada Dry. It's like super hard to make it taste like that. And I've always wondered why, because I've tried to make ginger ale at home using the Perrier carbonated water and the boiled ginger and sweetened with honey, and it never comes out like something that I'm like, ooh, this is, it tastes good, but it's nothing like Canada Dry. Well, here's why. Because Canada Dry ain't made from real ginger ale. It's not made from real ginger. That's why. And if you think I sound annoyed by that, you are correct. It says that Canada Dry only actually contains a microscopic drop of ginger flavor extract. So this mom in New York City is the reason why we all get to know this. Thank God for this lady. Julie Fletcher says she was misled by Dr. Pepper Snapple Group, which makes Canada Dry, because she bought into the idea that the bubbly brand was, quote, a healthier alternative to regular sodas because it was made from ginger root. She says Canada Dry's ginger flavor extract is not real ginger, as reasonable consumers understand the term. She filed a class action lawsuit in New York. It is manufactured in a lab using various chemicals and extraction processes. She's from a tiny village roughly 2 hours south of Buffalo, New York, called Bolivar, and she regularly bought ginger ale by Canada Dry in 2-liter bottles for her kids. She knew that ginger root can calm an upset stomach, and she often purchased Canada Dry for her children when they were sick, believing that the ginger root in the beverage would soothe their stomach aches. The soda contains some ginger compounds, but only a minuscule amount, amounting to less than 2 parts per million of ginger. Canada Dry claims that it is 100% natural flavor, but actually it's full of high fructose corn syrup, citric acid, and preservatives. So, Plano, Texas, Dr. Pepper Snapple Group actually capitalized on their Canada Dry is made from real ginger campaign by using commercials, creating commercials where workers pull up ginger root plants on Jack's Ginger Farm, voicing over in the background, real ginger, real taste. Within 6 months of adding the claim, Canada Dry sales skyrocketed by almost 9%. And they've continued to increase every year thereafter because people like me, even with sales of regular sodas continuing to decline. Similar lawsuits have been filed in Missouri, Massachusetts, and California. DPSG didn't return a message to the Post requesting comment. The Missouri suit was dismissed, but in that case, Dr. Pepper Snapple Group argued that independent tests showing 0 amounts of ginger doesn't mean there's no ginger in it. That was their argument that the judge accepted. The company claimed ginger is used to make the natural flavoring. So, I'm not going to leave you on that bad note today, except that I am, because the show is basically over, and I am totally miffed about not being able to purchase ginger ale anymore. So I'm on the hunt, y'all. I will find a ginger-based replacement for my Canada Dry ginger ale, and when I do, I will post it on my Instagram account so that we can all enjoy it together. This is an outrage, and I will not be without satisfaction. I will find something to replace ginger ale, and I will no longer purchase it. Sorry, I'm just not going to do it. So that's the show. Tomorrow, we're going to delve into the story about this Ohio cafe that gives discounts to customers who bring in their church bulletin and the atheists who hate it. God bless you. Have a great night. See you tomorrow.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast